So it's my very great pleasure to introduce Dr. Howard Stein, I don't know, never can remember. Howard is a psychohistorian, anthropologist, organizational consultant, poet, and one of the most prolific and long-standing contributor to psychohistorical thought. Professor Emeritus at the University of Oklahoma Health Science Center. He's the author, co-author, or editor of more than 30 books, including numerous volumes of poetry, and has published hundreds of scholarly works and poems. Many of you also know him as the IPHA's Psychohistory Poet Laureate. Today, Howard will present applied psychohistorical poetry as an instrument for healing group violence or something else, he will tell us, in what promises to be a unique and deeply moving session. Howard will explore how poetry can serve not only as art, but as a psychohistorical way of knowing, helping us access unconscious dimensions of violence, suffering, and healing. Through poetry, witness, reflection, and shared experience, he invites us to consider how words themselves may help mend wounds created by history and culture. So please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Howard Stein.
Good morning, everyone all over the world from Oklahoma, U.S. I'm honored and pleased that not only I, but the topic of poetry in psychohistory, poetry of psychohistory, is included in the compass of psychohistorical thinking and writing and research. And the question for me has always been, what's its use? Why do we bother? And my first point is that what poetry does not do, it's not lineal, it's not direct. It's not like taking a hammer to a nail on wood. And it is not a process of strategic planning to benchmarking to outcome. Poetry seems a lot vaguer, but in fact, it is of extraordinary value in that it, by increasing mental space, interpersonal space, intersubjective space between the poet, the psychohistorian, and the world, one can not only think outside the box, but sometimes one can forget about the box and start seeing and feeling the entire world much differently. I use the image of poetry and psychohistory is a different way of knowing. It's not better than or worse than. It is simply a different way, a supplement, a complement. And I want to add to those of you who might even hate poetry. Let's say you're listening to me and you would like to just turn this off and say, Howard, I hate poetry. Why am I listening to you? I want to make room for you because maybe your idiom is painting. Maybe it's music. Maybe it's a whole lot of other things. What I would like you to give me the chance is to translate what I'm saying about poetry into painting, into composing music, into musical performance. So I'm not here as a salesman of poetry. What I am here is an advocate of the arts and the way art works as a way of contributing to expanding the breadth and the depth, like Freud's wonderful archaeological model, not only topographic. of our understanding of everything, anything in psychohistory. I think it is an uncanny uh, fortune that my talk follows Peter's, because I will beg, borrow, and steal from him, including things such as war and trauma, and and argue that poetry is not some kind of a epiphenomenon. It's kind of a some kind of a gooey icing on the cake. It's part of the recipe of cake. It's part of the recipe for what psychohistory is, how to make sense of it. Before I start to read some poetry, I would like to say a few things about what its contribution might be. I'm going to start, as I always do, on a tangent. There's a newspaperman, early 20th century, named Finley Peter Dunn, who said the function of newspapers is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. A lot of poets have adopted this, that poetry is not simply some kind of a sideshow in the main circus, a very unhappy circus called history, but rather that poetry can comfort, and poetry can be an astringent to help us to awaken. A large part of what poetry has become to me, and it's evolved over decades, is that poetry is a way of bearing witness to what is, rather than to buying into and identifying with the current, even enforced fictions. So some of you may know who are interested in poetry that for about the last 20 or 30 years, there's even a genre of poetry called the poetry of witness, to give voice, to give sight to people who are banished from sight, who are banished from hearing, who have no voice. Now, I want to caution myself and you. We have no right to speak for someone else. Out in Oklahoma, and in among a lot of Native Americans throughout the country, one of the things that Native Americans have resented about Anglos, not only in poetry, but in literature, is arrogating to ourselves the right to speak for them, to write their history. Now, I can understand the need for outside perspectives as well as inside perspectives. But the need for outside perspectives often is used to write off what the native thinks, what the lived experience of the person inside the group. And I'm talking not only about American Indians, I'm talking about Russians in World War II. I'm talking about Ukrainians right now. I'm talking about what it's like to live in the age of Trump. So I will ask also your forgiveness, because I have very poor eyesight, and if I look like I'm jiggling all over the place to try to see what I've written, I am, because it's hard to keep things in focus. Let's start out with William Carlos Williams, a great American physician, poet in the early middle 20th century. In a poem called Asphodel, That Greeny Flower, he wrote the following lines. It is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. Now, I would, of course, add men and women and people of whatever gender they want to identify with. I want to focus also not just on the words, but the key to poetry is sound, how it's said. The one way of killing poetry is to become only visual. Poetry is about sound, about hearing, about saying out loud and hearing and talking back and forth with each other about what one experiences. Let me do that again and listen simply to the rhythm, the music. It is difficult, da 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 da, to get the news from poems, da 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 da. Yet men die miserably every day, da 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 da, for lack of what is found there, da 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 da. Composers, quote, set words to music, as in German lieder or operas or oratorio, all the time. But if we don't pay attention to the sound, the imagery, the metaphor, the alliteration, everything you learned in high school English 101, you miss the whole point. So in my asking you to listen, I encourage you, if you wish, close your eyes. Don't look at Pixel Stein, or virtual Pixel Stein, but rather let the sound become incorporated in you, so that you're not only hearing words of Howard Stein, but it will function maybe like resonating tuning forks, that it'll resonate with your life. To me, the main sign of success of anything I write is whether it gives you your experience, your life, your world, your feelings. To say, attaboy, good poem. I flunked. Because if this gives you your life, then in a discussion, maybe 20 minutes from now, you're not only going to talk with me, but I hope with each other about what did this poem make you think about or feel? What did it remind you of in your own life? My hope is actually that this talk is a kind of a gift to give you yourself back to yourself. Now, I want to start with both Peter Petschauer and Jeffrey Rubin about the depth of experience, of feeling, of seeing the world anew with respect to a specific era of trauma, World War I. So much in history, psychohistory, has been written about the war. I want to read a part of one poem and another poem that will give you, I hope, another way of thinking about, feeling about, embodying World War I, taking it in. What did it feel like for the people who were there? The first part is the first stanza of the great poem, The Second Coming, of William Butler Yeats, who wrote it in 1919, deeply traumatized, horrified by World War I. And my guess is a lot of you who know poetry have probably memorized this. Forgive me for not reading the entire poem. turning and turning in the widening gyre. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dim tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. World War I, 2026, Bosnia, Rwanda, World War II. Fill in your blanks. The second one is written by that profound soldier poet, British, of World War I, Wilfred Owen, whose work I'm in love with. His poem, a little longer than what I read of William Butler Yeats, is called The Parable of the Old Man and the Young. And I want to give away the show. And you can kill me for this because I guess this could be called reductionism. Oedipus is alive and well in history and psychohistory and World War I. Fathers and sons. So Abram took Rose and clave the wood and went and took the fire with him and a knife. And as they sojourned, both of them together, Isaac the firstborn spake and said, My father, behold the preparations, fire and iron, but where is the lamb for burnt offering? Then Abram bound the son with belts and straps, and builded parapets and trenches there, and stretched forth the knife to slay his son. When lo, an angel called out to him from heaven, saying, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do anything to him. Behold, a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. Offer the ram of pride instead. But the old man would not do so, but slew his son and half the seed of Europe, one by one. Now, I'm not going to get into the pretense of poetry analysis, lit quit. But as you heard both of these, the second one obviously from somewhere in the book of Genesis about Abraham, Isaac, God, angels, and metaphor. What is Wilfred Owen doing here? He's transposing music from one key to the other. He's transposing music from the key of the well-known story of the Akedah, the covenant between Abraham, Isaac, God, to the horribly severed covenant in World War I. Now, I'm not saying throw away all the history books of World War I, but I bet you all the money I don't have that these two poems give you another way of looking, feeling, hearing, entering. It's called experience near in the jargon rather than experience distant. I think that World War I and the word trauma will feel like, will mean something, will be experienced different. So that, let's say, as a psychohistorian, you go back to writing about World War I, unless I'm dead wrong, you'll take these two poems with you. And they Um, unless you're as emotionally dense as cinder block and are emotionally well defended so that you turn away from the slaughter and say, war is war. If you don't do that, but let this resonate with you, World War I will be something different from what you've known it from before. Not yes, but yes, and. Now, some of my own poems. This one is called Survivor's Wound. It's in memory of Paul Celan, the great poet of World War II and the Holocaust. And it kind of follows the other two. If none will see atrocity, does the survivor have a wound? If I screamed and no one heard me, would I have screamed at all? My torment is double, holes in my flesh and holes in time. I speak for the dying and for the dead. Affirm at least my scream. Nothing happened, you whisper back. Your atrocity is nothing but a dream. If none will see atrocity, does the survivor have a wound? I want to go to a couple of poems that may seem absolutely absurd in the context of what I've just read. I want to talk with you about dandelions in spring, dandelions in gardens, dandelions as a certain genre of our language and culture called weeds. Now, those of you who are familiar with corn or wheat farming know that weeds interfere with, if not destroy, the domesticated crop. But that image with regard to domesticated growing for the sake of feeding us is part of a wider picture of what kind of figure dandelions represent. Um, let me give you an example of dandelions in recent history. Do you remember those straggling caravans of people from Guatemala and Honduras who were trying to escape being killed, crossing Mexico to the American border? They became, in our official ideology, this invading horde of weeds who was going to attack and destroy our precious, perfect lawn of fescue and bluestem. I will not claim to be in love with dandelions, but they are perhaps not only weeds, even though I can understand that people who have the aesthetic of carpet perfect lawns might find them as the um, evil enemy. Um, I You're going to kill me because I'm belaboring the obvious. But I encourage you, whatever your subject, maybe write a poem about something seemingly as ridiculous as a dandelion or a weed in relationship to the subjects you're investigating. And maybe it might resonate and teach you something that you didn't know. Here's the poems. The first is called Scourge of Spring. Again, with your eyes and your ears, try to hear and picture this. After so rogue a winter, ambush of delight, a solitary dandelion's long, narrow petals speak bright yellow to the still silent sod. Herald and scourge, lower than amoebas on the evolutionary ladder of taste. This unwelcome weed proclaims, it is time to awaken. The still frozen world renewed by a pest. So, so maybe those enemy aliens who were going to ruin everything might also be sources of renewal. Oh, God forbid. Second one, Herald of Spring. In the narrow crawl space at the corner of where three bricks meet, a dandelion plants its roots, spreads its long yellow petals, and stakes its claim. The prince of weeds has found a home. Now, keep in mind, Stein Stein is out of his mind anyway, but I haven't just been talking about dandelions. I mean, I'm a few standard deviations off anyway, but dandelions aren't just about dandelions. They're about violence. And the question is, how do we deal with violence? The most popular weed killer today is something that you aim and like a flamethrower, and it just kills every weed in sight, including those that are still unborn. Let's talk about a bird feeder in winter. I think a lot of us have them outside. You think they're just decorations? Why am I thinking of bird feeders and violence? Birds come to our feeder thinking of that it's not part of the natural habitat. They do not know that in winter we worry lest they starve. The feeder swings with abandon in the cold wind. The birds do not know we are watching them. Well, okay. I'm going to go from the subtle to the sledgehammer. Those who were old enough have lived through the era, the beginning of downsizing in the 80s. And that era ain't over yet. Thousands and tens of thousands of people are still being dumped. And it's all for supposedly financial exigency. And there are lots of books re-engineering the corporation. It is all about lineal, rational decision-making in finance. But those of you who have been downsized, or who have family members who have been, or have friends, or live in whole communities that have been affected by downsizing, know in your guts, your kishkis, that it's violence. What is happening has not happened. And if it has halved, and if it has, we do not want to know. People I worked with yesterday, today are suddenly whisked away. No one asks where they go, or even wants to know. There's no blood to show for their appearance. They're just not round anymore. The signs are all read the same. On the highways, in the stores, the elevators, and the halls, what is happening has not happened. And if it has, we do not want to know. Now, I'm trying to look at my watch, and I know I'm supposed to shut up after 35 minutes. Maybe give me a few more minutes to do a couple of other things.
Go ahead.
Think about, I'm sorry,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
this is the longest poem, so bear with me. In your workplaces, in corporations, in hospitals, this category of people called housekeeping. They appear when you're not there, they disappear, and everything's wonderful. My argument in this poem is that I think a lot of us don't pay attention to people who hold our world together, and we do violence. Silently, wordlessly, flawlessly, they clean up our tables after we finish eating, our offices, our clinics, our hospitals, after we've left work for the day. They're nameless to us, unknown only by their uniform, that known only by their uniform, if we notice them at all. Today, they're Mexican and Guatemalan. 30 years ago, they were Black. 80 years ago, Polish, Slovak, Hungarian, Jewish. They perform their service in waves of geography and accent. We scarcely see them, but they are paid in low wages to tend closely to us, lest in the morning a single wastebasket still will be full. In the hotel, they're called housekeeping, labeling theory. I leave the room a mess in the morning and return to perfect order in the afternoon. What a splendid vanishing show. We do not see the bending or the lifting, though. To us, their work of disappearance and reappearance hints at magic. To them, it is no magic at all. I want to read one more ugly poem and then end, I hope, on a realistic note of hope. And one of them is that very last words in the group process yesterday, that of a hug. This poem, and I'm going way out on a twig to read it, is called Upon Listening to the 15-String Quartets of Dmitri Shostakovich. You don't need to know the quartets. You probably have to have an inkling to what hell he went through, from being so prominent and praised by Stalin to fearing for his life for the NKVD, KGB taking him and killing him. Isn't it like him to begin with a ditty, a jig, a little tune? You start to whistle until you gasp for air. His ballroom is where the skeletons dance. Mary, Mary, quite contrary. Mary, Mary, quite contrary. Oh, God, I'm sorry. How does your garden grow? With the machine gun shells and children's yells and pretty maids all in a row. Bobby Yar, dance with me to the ravine. Tell me how long a bel canto line you can sing before you hear them scream. Jack Sprat, he ate no fat, he stole some bread, and when they caught him, shot him dead. What can strings do but hack, stab, shudder, and when frenzy spent, fall into hushed lament? Dimitri, my Dimitri, fiddle me a tune, then twist it till it squirts blood on the moon. Hush, my little son. Lean upon your father. You may sleep now. You may sleep now. 2 final poems, both mercifully short. And forgive me if I cry. First one is called Dialogue. Think of therapy. One analyst, one patient. Think of trying to imagine therapy in a world of violence. Poem's called Dialogue. Patient to therapist. I am so full of hate. Therapist to patient. Whose hate are you filled with? Patient to therapist. Is that why I am hearing voices? Therapist to patient. Do you recognize yours among all those voices? The patient erupted in incontrollable sobs. The therapist waited, offered the company of silence as the patient wept. Then the therapist to patient. I will help you get your voice back. Patient to therapist. So that's what this is. Voice lessons. Then for the longest time, they spoke no words, but between them shared the voice of silence in their midst. My last poem is called Embraces. Now, in our world, there are a broad spectrum of hugs, embraces. One is what I would call a very conventional church hug. It's about 180 degrees, shoulder to shoulder. You barely touch. And then there's this incredibly tight bear hug in which nobody wants to let go. You hugging me, I hugging you, not so easily parsed as it may appear. Your arms envelop my body as if they could reach all the way around. I respond in kind, as if you had extended an invitation. Soon I could not tell where your hug ended and mine began. For a moment, 2 lives held by a single embrace, as if the hug had an existence all its own, and we were but its fulfillment. Thank you.